I thought I knew exactly who I was meeting that night. By the time I walked into the cafe, I had already decided who she was in my mind. And I couldn't have been more wrong. It started the way most things do now, on a screen. I had matched with her on a dating app a week earlier. Her name was Lauren. Her photos were simple. No dramatic poses, no filtered beach sunsets, just normal pictures. One at what looked like a work conference, one with a dog, one sitting at a kitchen table with a half-finished cup of coffee. Her bio said she worked in organizational consulting. That sounded polished, structured, ambitious. I remember thinking she was probably one of those highly efficient, tightly scheduled people, the kind who color codes their calendar and replies to emails in under 3 minutes. Our messages were steady but not flirty. She asked thoughtful questions. She took hours to respond sometimes. Not in a playing hard to get way, just measured. And I filled in the blanks. I assumed she was career focused, probably guarded, probably analyzing me as much as I was analyzing her. I imagined she had everything figured out. That was the first mistake. We agreed to meet on a Thursday evening after work. I chose a quiet cafe downtown. Neutral ground, good lighting, casual enough to escape if needed. I arrived early. That's my thing. I like observing before stepping in. I watch people come and go, rehearsing possible conversations in my head. I told myself, just be calm, just be interesting, don't overshare. When she walked in, she looked exactly like her pictures, and somehow not at all like I expected. She wasn't scanning the room confidently. She hesitated at the door for half a second, like she was orienting herself. She smoothed her sleeve before spotting me. Small detail, but it stuck with me. She smiled when she saw me, and it wasn't the polished smile I had imagined. It was warmer, almost relieved. "Hey," she said, "I'm glad you're real." I laughed. Same. We ordered coffee, sat down, the usual first date rhythm. Where are you from? What do you do? How long have you lived here? But something felt slightly off. Not bad, just misaligned. She asked me more questions than I expected. Not surface level ones, real ones. What do you actually enjoy about your job? When was the last time you changed your mind about something important? What makes you feel like you're doing okay in life? I remember thinking, this is intense for a Thursday night. I answered carefully at first, then more honestly. But every time I tried to place her, career-driven consultant, analytical, maybe slightly intimidating, it didn't quite fit. Halfway through the conversation, I noticed she wasn't drinking her coffee. She was holding it, turning the cup slowly in her hands. "You okay?" I asked. She smiled quickly. "Yeah, I don't usually do this." "Coffee?" "Meeting strangers." There it was, a crack in the image I had built. I leaned back. "You seem pretty comfortable." She let out a quiet laugh. "That's the consulting training. I can talk to executives in boardrooms. This is harder." That surprised me more than it should have. Harder? This? She looked down at the table for a second. I overthink everything, especially first impressions. I felt something shift internally. I had assumed she was evaluating me. Turns out she was worried about being evaluated. We continued talking, but now I was paying attention differently. I noticed the slight pauses before she answered personal questions, the way she occasionally checked my reaction after saying something vulnerable, the way she seemed relieved whenever I shared something imperfect about myself. At one point, I mentioned how I sometimes feel behind compared to friends who are married or further along in their careers. She looked up quickly. "I feel that all the time," she said. "I just don't usually say it." That sentence lingered, because in my head, she was the type who never felt behind. As the night went on, she told me about her job. Yes, she worked with leadership teams. Yes, she helped companies make big decisions. But then she added something I hadn't expected. "Most of what I do isn't strategy. It's helping people admit what they're afraid of." She explained how executives would argue over numbers, but the real issue was usually fear. Fear of losing control,
relevance, status. People hide fear really well, she said, especially high performers. I felt that land, because I hide mine really well too. There was a quiet moment after that. The cafe had started to empty, the background music felt softer. And then she said something that completely shifted the night. "Can I tell you something slightly uncomfortable?" I nodded. "When we first started messaging, I almost didn't agree to meet you." I tried to keep my expression neutral. "Why?" "You seemed very put together." That caught me off guard. I almost laughed. "Trust me, I'm not." She shook her head gently. "No, I mean it. Your job, your pictures, the way you write. I assumed you probably had everything figured out. I didn't want to feel like I was being measured." Measured. That word hit harder than it should have. Because the entire week leading up to this, I had been measuring her in my mind. Career, composure, confidence, and she had been doing the same to me. Two people sitting across from each other, both worried about being silently evaluated. That was a turning point. I realized I hadn't been meeting her. I was meeting a projection. A version of her constructed from photos, a job title, and my own assumptions about ambitious people. And she had been meeting a projection too. We both thought we were walking into an assessment. Instead, we were just two people trying to not feel exposed. That realization changed the tone completely. The conversation softened. We stopped performing. She told me she sometimes questions whether she chose the right career path. That consulting felt impressive on paper, but isolating in real life. I admitted that I often say I'm busy as a way of avoiding deeper conversations. She said she worries people only value her competence. I said I worry people only value my stability. It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no confessions of trauma. Just quiet honesty. And the more honest it became, the more I saw how wrong my initial perception had been. She wasn't a hyper-confident consultant evaluating my life trajectory. She was someone navigating her own insecurities, just packaged differently. On the walk back to our cars, there was no grand romantic tension, just calm. Before we said goodbye, she paused. "I'm glad we both showed up." I said she was not evaluating my life trajectory. She was someone navigating her own insecurities, just packaged differently. On the walk back to our cars, there was no grand romantic tension, just calm. Before we said goodbye, she paused. "I'm glad we both showed up." "Me too," I replied. On the drive home, I kept replaying the night. Not because of chemistry, but because of perspective. I realized how quickly I built entire psychological profiles of people based on limited data. A job title becomes a personality. A photo becomes a confidence level. A writing style becomes emotional stability. It's efficient. Our brains love efficiency. But it's rarely accurate. I thought I was meeting a polished, intimidating professional who had her life mapped out. I met someone thoughtful, uncertain, self-aware, and quietly brave for showing up despite her anxiety. And the uncomfortable truth? She probably thought the same distorted things about me. That night didn't turn into a long-term relationship. We went on a few more dates. It eventually faded in a mutual, respectful way. But the lesson stayed. Now, whenever I meet someone new, on a date, at work, even casually, I notice the story forming in my head. He's arrogant, she's insecure, they're successful, they're lost. And I pause, because I remember that cafe. I remember two people sitting across from each other, both misreading the other's confidence as certainty. Most of us aren't who we appear to be at first glance. We're coping, we're compensating, we're trying. We present the polished version because it feels safer, and then we assume everyone else's polish is permanent. But behind most competence is doubt. Behind most calm is overthinking. Behind most confidence is rehearsal. The mind loves assumptions because they reduce uncertainty. They help us feel in control. But assumptions also block empathy. That night taught me something simple and slightly uncomfortable. When I think I understand someone quickly, I probably don't. Real understanding takes curiosity and patience. and sometimes the willingness to admit, I might be wrong about you. The biggest shift wasn't about dating, it was about perception. I realized how many of my interactions are shaped not by who the other person actually is, but by who I've decided they are, and how often that decision says more about my fears than theirs. Now, when I feel intimidated by someone's success, I ask myself, what might they be worried about? When someone seems overly confident, I wonder, what are they protecting? When I feel judged, I ask, am I projecting that? That one evening didn't dramatically change my life, but it quietly changed how I see people. And that has changed everything. Because once you realize that everyone is walking in with their own hidden narrative, it becomes harder to reduce them to a role. We're not just our job titles, or our photos, or our composed introductions. We're layered, and most of the time, we're just hoping the person across the table is kind enough to look past the surface. Sometimes I think about that first moment when she walked into the cafe, how I had already decided who she was. If I had stayed attached to that version, I would have missed the real conversation entirely. How many times have I done that before? How many times has someone done that to me? Maybe the real shift isn't about being right or wrong about people. Maybe it's about staying open long enough to find out.